At time of this review going out, it should be Christmas Day, if I've gotten my timings right. And I'd like to wish all of you at home a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now on to my review of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Merry Christmas, Mr. Bond fans. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of the 11th James Bond book and 10th novel, written by Ian Fleming, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And funny enough, this book, as well as its film adaptation, take place over the Christmas holiday period, or at least, well, from chapter 6 onwards anyway. Chapters 1 to 5 are back in the autumn, possibly even before Spy Who Loved Me took place. Possibly. Or at the very least, not long afterwards. So, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So the story of this book sees James Bond investigating Blofeld, hunting him down following the events of Thunderball, which is what we saw him doing during the events of The Spy Who Loved Me. At the start of this book, he manages to prevent the suicide of a woman known as Countess Teresa di Lacenzo, or Tracy for short, before they are both taken to see Tracy's father, Marc-Ange Draco, head of the Union, a crime syndicate in Europe that is mainly based in France. Marc-Ange wants Bond to marry Tracy. This is due to Bond's actions toward Tracy prior to him preventing her from committing suicide, as he is trying to is looking after her a little bit after she runs into a bit of trouble, so to speak. So Bond and Marc-Ange have this meeting, and Bond considers it, and he will definitely continue to see Tracy. In the meantime, he must find Blofeld. Prior to this, he was considering resigning from the Secret Service, as he was getting fed up of hunting Blofeld. He was getting a bit fed up, and he decided it was time to call it quits. However, with a new lead thanks to Draco, Bond eventually is able to find Blofeld via going through the College of Arms, as Blofeld wants to claim a title of Count de Blojan, something along those lines. He's asked the College of Arms to see if they can trace the family tree so that his claim could be made legitimate. After a meeting with a member of the College of Arms, Stable Basky, Bond eventually heads up to Piers Gloria under the name Sir Hilary Bray, or rather taking the identity of a fellow College of Arms member who is currently up in Scotland at the time of the events of the story. So Bond heads up to Switzerland, and they can't get the Swiss involved for legal reasons. They can't even get their own British division in Switzerland at Station Z for Zurich. They can't even get those involved, so it has to be a Bond on his own mission. So he heads up the mountain, and what we get is probably the most dangerous and most risky adventure in terms of spy work, as Bond has to infiltrate Piers Gloria. He meets Irma Bunt, Blofeld's secretary, as well as 10 girls, not 12 like in the film, just 10, at the facility. Gets to know some of them a little bit a bit too well in places. It's Bond, what do you expect? And meets up with the Count irregularly, but irregularly enough to do the work, and he has to continue doing the College of Arms stuff. When his cover is blown by an agent from Station Z who is following their own lead, um, on some other illegal activities by Blofeld, Bond then has to make a daring escape from Piers Gloria and make it back to the nearest little town. It's here that Bond is reunited with Tracy, who rescues him, sort of, and then later Bond goes to see M and some other people from the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Agriculture are brought into M's house, where after Bond and M have had their meeting, and then they realise what Blofeld is actually doing. Back at Piers Gloria, Blofeld was trying to cure some allergies of the patients that were there, and he was doing that through hypnosis. And as it turns out, Blofeld's actual plan is to use biological warfare against the UK to damage its agricultural industry, so that no crops will be harvested, or none will be grown, rather, and animals will have this disease that could affect people during eating them. A former person at the clinic, former patient, had already been sent back home after they'd done their thing. This girl had been a turkey farmer and was now allergic to turkeys until going to the Piers Gloria, and then afterwards she was told that this little thing to throw on the turkeys would make them grow fatter and more delicious, when in actual fact it would give them this nasty flu sort of thing, this illness that could spread to humans if the turkeys were eaten. So a lot of turkeys had to be slaughtered. So that was sort of the testing, and so that was sort of the start of it. And the other girls are on their way back from Switzerland, that Blofeld has presumably hidden away instructions of what to do next. Again, there is no official way that the Secret Service can stop Blofeld, so M authorises Bond to go alone, along with help from Mark-Ange and his people from the Union, to destroy Piers Gloria and to attempt to apprehend Blofeld. Blofeld does escape, but Piers Gloria is destroyed, and the biological warfare plan is stopped. And then Bond gets a happy ending with Tracy, where he proposed to her around chapter 19 time, after they escaped and that they were at the airport. And now this whole Blofeld thing is over. Yeah, the big man escaped, but Bond and Tracy marry, and they seem to have a happy ever after. Except they don't. Well, they do get married, but unfortunately the happiness is cut short literally just under an hour after the ceremony, a small ceremony, unlike in the film where it's a big one. But less than an hour after the ceremony, a red car goes past Bond and Tracy's car, and there is machine gun fire, or at least gunfire, and eventually this causes the car to crash, and Tracy has been shot. So yeah, we end on a sad and somber note to this story. So, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, this is a brilliant story. This is a great story. Some nitpicks out of the way first. It does kind of meander a little bit when we are at Piers Glory. It is a bit slow in places. I suppose that's the point. And again, in chapters 20 to 22, it is quite slow paced. Besides those niggles, there is not much wrong with this book. I will also say that Fleming seems to think that women like to be raped again, which is mentioned about chapter 5-ish, when Mark-Ange says that his late wife came up to the mountains of Corsica to look for bandits and was hoping to be raped, and then he would rape her. Fleming, you do realise women don't like to be raped, or anyone doesn't like to be raped. If they want sex, then it's consensual, providing the other the person they have sex with also consents to it. So it's not necessary rape if they literally go looking for someone to have sex with. Literally, even if it's rough, it's still considered consensual if both parties consent. So I don't get this obsession with women supposedly liking rape. I don't get it. On the plus side, at least we don't have Bond saying that he'll spank somebody in this book. That's a trope that's thankfully died, or at least is left from this instalment. On to more notable negative points. Tracy. Tracy in the film is one of the greatest Bond women of all time. One of the greatest characters of the entire series, played by the magnificent Dame Diana Rigg. Rest in peace. But in the book, we start off kind of with the more tight, up-strong character of Tracy earlier on when she's attempting to, before she commits, or at least attempts to commit suicide. But after some therapy off page or off screen, or book version of off screen, I should say, after some therapy, she then starts to become like a child again. This seems to be a problem with Fleming's writing of female characters. They just turn into children, or at the very least, young teenagers. Crying and whining quite a lot, or very emotional. I know he's not very good at writing women, but it seems to be forming into a formulaic pattern. And we've got some great women in the books, like Tiffany Case, Gala Brand, and even Vivian Mitchell from the last book was a pretty great character, and especially as we had the whole book about her. And it seemed like Fleming hadn't been able to write a female character pretty well, or at least until Bond turned up anyway, and basically stole part of the spotlight. But, well, to be honest, you could argue that Vivian stole most of the spotlight in that book. But now we're back to a, once Tracy's kind of gotten some therapy over her stuff, she starts to become like a, kind of like a kid again. She's like, besides helping Bond escape in chapters 18 and 19, she doesn't really do an awful lot. Bond helps her out at the start, and he falls in love with her over the course of the book. And in chapter 18, chapter 19, she helps him out, and he proposes to her in the latter of the two chapters, and then she's waiting for him whilst he finishes up his mission, and then they get married, and then she gets killed. But she doesn't really do an awful lot besides helping Bond out in chapter 18. There is not, she as a character isn't very memorable. If it wasn't for the fact that she becomes James Bond's wife at the very end, then she would be a more forgettable, or at least less remembered character in the series, compared to other ones. And again, also due to the fame from the film. But taking the film aside, the character in this book does very little outside of chapter 18 and some of the stuff from the start of the book. And which was a shame, because we had some great stuff with her at the very start, but by the time by the time Bond was proposing to her, she had kind of gone down a step or two, and then by the end she was really gone down a step. It's such a shame. This is the girl Bond marries in the book series. He didn't get to marry Vesper at the very end of Casino Royale because she committed suicide before Bond could get the chance. He did propose, but he didn't get to. But in this book, he marries her, and then she gets killed at the end, which is sad. But I think it would have been even better if we got more out of this character before her untimely demise, especially if she's going to be James Bond's wife. The one woman he finds a lot of similarities with, and feels like he can settle down with this woman, and it would either not affect his life too much, or it would make it better, or at least it's time to settle down at the very least. So it feels like we should have gotten more from this character. Thank God for the film doing that, because the film manages to not only add some more development of the two's relationship, but Tracy is much more active in the main event of that film as well. Not only does she help Bond out when he's escaping Piers Gloria, but there's some great action there, and then she later gets kidnapped, which then is partly Bond's motivation to go out and destroy Piers Gloria, alongside completing the mission. And that it's kind of quite important to that plot, as it's also part of Bond completing his mission. And then that helps with the ending packing a bit more of a punch at the end for the film. But whilst it's sad in the book, I feel like the character should have been grown a little bit more. We should have had a bit more development from her, and we should not have turned her into a kind of a emotional child towards the end. I know characters can be emotional, but it seems to be like it seems to be a thing with the female characters in these books, where they get a bit too emotional. I don't know whether that's Fleming's perception of female women, or if it's just his style of writing. My biggest issue is the fact that this is the character that Bond marries in the end, but we don't get enough of her. And when we do get her, sometimes it's the typical emotional female character from the other, like in the other books, or at the very least, just not as tough or as strong as she was earlier on. Um, so that's a shame. So Tracy is at a disadvantage in this story. Everybody else, however, is pretty great. Bond is great, and it's nice to see him kind of soften a little bit over the course of the book. Um, and when he decides to marry Tracy and he's falling in love with her, it's great to see him kind of decide it's time to settle down. And as well as his mission in Piers Glory, it's pretty great. He is also at the very start of the book. Or at least in earlier on in the book, anyway. He's considering resigning because he's getting a bit fed up of the manhunt of Blofeld, and to be honest, I can kind of see that. But I'm not sure whether Bond would be the type of character to resign. I mean, I can definitely see this Bond being fed up of chasing pointless leads that go nowhere. But yeah, I'm not sure if Bond himself would actually resign, unless it was just to get off this bloody case, I suppose. There is part of the book where he does try to get it off with a character called Ruby at Piers Glory, and I'm just thinking, but he's got Tracy waiting for him. He's falling in love with Tracy. This is the same problem as in the film, except in the... Actually, no, the film it's worse because he literally is in love with Tracy. I know Bond is like this character, does this often, but when you've got a true love kind of waiting for you, it kind of does look a bit dickish. This is more of a problem with the film because Bond and Tracy have actually developed their relationship by this point, as opposed to the book where it's like I mentioned, needed a bit more development. But it's still questionable here. I guess Bond couldn't keep it in for a week without going to see at least one of these beautiful girls. The girls themselves, the ones we get to know a bit, like Ruby and Violet, they're pretty good. They're good characters, especially Ruby. She's quite a fun character. Irma Bunt's also a pretty good character. The secretary to Blofeld, and quite a strict character in the hospice, shall we say, the center where the girls are getting their treatment. Blofeld also, it's because he's hiding. He's trying to be the Count de Blaujon. He's trying to get that title official from the College of Arms, and he doesn't really actually appear that much in this story. He appears. He and Bond talk about the College of Arms stuff, and then later on he's escaping from Piers Glory. So Blofeld actually doesn't really do an awful lot. Well, he does a lot behind the scenes, but he's not really a present in the story as much as we might expect. He's more behind the scenes working on his grand plan, whilst Bond's doing all the investigation. I am disappointed that, whilst I do think Bond escaping from Piers Glory without anyone noticing is pretty great, I'm disappointed that the whole plan is sort of more or less... I like characters working out the plan, but they work out every single detail in the about chapters 21, 22 time, and it feels like I feel like I would have liked Blofeld to at least explain some of this already, or at the very least have made his some sort of demands so that some people could realize, oh, hang on, he's doing this, and the way he's done this is doing this, and this. We worked out how he's doing it, and he's just told us what he's doing and why. And we work out how. It just feels like Blofeld, despite being the main villain, is kind of overshadowed in places. We only really get him when doing the whole "is he the Count Blaujon" thing. Heck, throughout part of the book, it's even questioning whether it's the same guy, whether Bond's got the right person. And then we only get him once more towards the end, chapter 25, when he's escaping, and then chapter... he might appear in chapter 27, but we don't really get a description of him. But it's a shame he doesn't really do as much. It would have been great for him to have a bit more interaction. Maybe just like he turns out at the clinic and talks to some of the patients, or to Irma Bunt, or to Bond a few times. It would have been a bit more interesting to have him do a bit more to do. Again, the film does this really well. They get Blofeld to do a lot, it's even going out after Bond himself personally, and getting quite involved in the action towards in the climax. So yeah, I do think Blofeld in the book could have been a bit used more. Um, Other regulars, Lorena Parsonbury, Bond's secretary, has departed and has gone on to get married. So she's replaced by Mary Goodnight, who, of course, will become the main Bond woman in The Man with the Golden Gun. But first, she is Bond's secretary, and she's a good character. Very good, even. Liked her. There is similarities between her and Lorena Parsonbury, and again, typical female writing by Fleming, but some pretty good stuff from her. And the only other one to make note of is M, who's also pretty great, and a couple of other guys from chapters 21 and 22, that when they realise what Blofeld's up to, they're all right. Pretty good for what they got. And also Mark Arge is a pretty good supported character. Pretty fun character. And that's in terms of character. Story, it's a greatly paced story. And well, apart from bits that Piers Gloria and when working out the Blofeld's plan with biological warfare, it kind of does drag a little bit in those places. And like I said, I would have liked to have seen more of Tracy in parts of the story, especially to develop her and Bond's romance. We got part of it earlier on and part of it in chapters 18 and 19, but due to the writing of the character, it doesn't really develop the romance as much as, say, in the film. It's around a similar level to the Bond-Vesper romance of Casino Royale, the novel. Or at least I think the motivations are a little stronger this time around, but I think they needed a little bit more time together. But as for the mission has a great plot besides the bits where it meanders. But I do think Blofeld should have told or revealed more about his plot to Bond, or sent sort of message to the British government or whatever, and or at the very least made a bit more of an appearance in the story. I think the film version actually takes all these criticisms I have with the book and actually makes them a bit better. They fix these problems. They make the story that even better by making some of the issues a little bit better. So yeah, overall, I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a great book, but it does have a few issues that I think that do get fixed with the film version. But despite that, the story itself is really great read in places, apart from where it does drag a little bit, and is a great story. With the exception of maybe having Tracy needing to have more to do, I think it basically gets down the romantic side of Bond really well. Like I said, I just wish that Tracy got more to do and didn't turn into an emotional child at the end, like many of the other Bond female characters in the previous books have done. She was so great at the start as well, and she had her great moments throughout, but not enough, and she needed to be more active. That kind of lets it down a little bit. Besides that, the story is still a really great read, and I highly recommend it. The ending is also still quite emotional, despite not as much Tracy in the story, or having with the character being turned into, like I said, the emotional child like previous female characters have been. But it still packs a punch. But I think it would have packed even more of a punch if, like in the film, they developed the romance, if the character was a bit stronger and better written and had appeared a bit more in the story, or at least had some more action or stuff to do. I know Bond's got to go to Piers Gloria and do his whole mission thing, but he could have still had stuff with her to do later on. Chapter 26 is basically just fluff. It's basically this is the post-mission fluff and the pre-marriage fluff. We're just kind of just talking out its kind of calmness, etc., and a little hint of Bunt perhaps seeing Bond still alive, but it does feel a bit like fluff. This would have been a great opportunity to develop Tracy's character, but this is where she becomes the emotional child at the very end. This chapter 19, but yeah, but nevertheless, this is still a really great book, and I highly recommend you check it out. Overall, I will be giving On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the novel, a 9 out of 10. really wanted to give it a 10. I was very close to giving it a 10. However, my issues with the development and treatment of Tracy, as well as also some slow, draggy stuff around chapters 11, 12, 13, and chapters 21, 22, and a bit of fluff elsewhere in places, it does let the side down a little bit. And also, I do think, like as I mentioned earlier, the film improves on many other niggles alongside those ones. So, yeah, this story, it's one of the best stories of the. It's one of the best books in the series, and it's possibly got the best story that can be translated into any media. But unfortunately, this version had its niggles. The original story version had its niggles that couldn't quite make it to 10 out of 10 territory like Moonraker or From Russia of Love. It might still be top 3 territory though. It's still probably top 3, top 4 territory of the book's ranking. Like how the film is top 4 at the moment, in my opinion. That being said, I do prefer the film. I think the film, as I mentioned, improves on the issues I had with this book, as well as take what was great about this book and makes it, if not as good, even better. My only niggle is that Bond and Blofeld have already met in You Only Live Twice, which I think was an oversight on the producers. They should have stayed off. They could have revealed Blofeld in that film, but they should have stayed off the meeting. I think that's also one of the reasons why You Only Live Twice should not have been made before Majesty's, especially as the whole thing about the book is it's directly following Majesty's. I think You Only Live Twice should have been the 7th film rather than the 5th, and they should have done Diamonds Are Forever or Man with the Golden Gun or something as the 5th film. They were planning Golden Gun for the 6th or 7th films before eventually choosing it for the 9th. Besides that, the only other problem with the film is George Lazenby doing a mostly wooden performance throughout, with the exception of that ending, which he handles really well. Actually, that is his best performance of the film. He's also very good in the fight scenes, and he's quite a physical actor, but besides the final scene, his acting is quite wooden throughout the film. It would have been great for Sean Connery to be in the film, but that being said, he was getting bored with the role after You Only Live Twice. That's why he left. And also, Majesty's does feel pretty great with a new Bond in the role. So maybe it would have been good if Roger Moore had been in this film. In fact, I was actually trying to imagine George Lazenby in this book, but I kept having Roger Moore trying to steal the spotlight. And George Lazenby was 29 when he took over this role. Timothy Dalton was around that age when he was offered the part, and he turned it down for being too young. He thought he was too young. So how great would it have been to have Roger Moore or Timothy Dalton in the film? And as we got George Lazenby, I think what's even worse for Lazenby is that he decided not to come back, which kind of hampers his performance in this film, and he doesn't get the chance to try anything better in the next film. Plus, the ending of Majesty's Secret Service, the film would have been a more happy ending, and then the end of the book would be the pre-title scene of the next film. However, as Lazenby was not going to come back, this ending would ultimately be at the end of the film itself. Although that does help with capsulating the end of that story really well, and then that leaves the next story to be its own thing. Although had Lazenby been in Diamonds Are Forever, it would have definitely some sort of follow-up to this story, whilst when Connery came back, it was definitely its very own thing. And Tracy wasn't really mentioned until The Spy Who Loved Me. Not by name, but it was a mention of her, and then her name popped up in For Your Eyes Only, where they did try to wrap up the Blofeld stuff there. So overall, I do prefer the film to the book, but the book is definitely a great read, and it's definitely, this story is one of the best stories that can be translated into any Bond media, alongside Casino Royale and From Russia with Love, amongst others. So that's it from my review of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Next time, James Bond goes to Japan in the 12th James Bond book and the 11th novel, and the last one to be published before Ian Fleming's untimely death. You Only Live Twice. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Also, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.